Welcome to the Here We Go podcast, the podcast dedicated to encouraging and nourishing our lives, and also gives us a reason to talk.
Yes, that's true, Jeff. I've missed talking with you, buddy. It's been a few weeks since you've been able to be on the show, and it's exciting times to have you back on here, buddy.
Thanks for having me. Dante changed it up a little bit on here, so
yes.
I was following through with what I used to know.
It's true.
And then went into insert reason, and
you don't want to say that.
And I was like,
that's not in the script.
No, well, it's in the script.
It's in the script, so you can say whatever you want.
That's right.
Stay classy, San Diego. So anyway, no, that's awesome. How was your week, Jeff? How's things been?
My week's been all right. It's been all right. Yeah, it's I haven't had too much work, so I worked basically Monday. Haven't worked Tuesday or today.
Oh,
yeah.
If only you can get paid for not doing anything.
That would be amazing. I wish it was salary.
If anyone finds a job where you can get paid for not doing anything, can you please send that into the show? We'd really appreciate that.
We would. All of us would.
If we could even just get paid for just talking on this thing, that'd be pretty cool.
Or just having beards.
Beards, we could be like beard models. That'd be awesome. You think that could work out, Dante? He's shaking his head no.
Dante? That's because he doesn't have a beard.
Dante does not have a beard. How many of our listeners think that Dante should have a beard? Please send in your requests.
Yeah, send emails.
Yes, and
Can
we'll send in
check that
pictures
for
as
us too,
things go
Dante.
in. Yeah,
Pastor, I looking at what I have right now, I have not shaved in a year.
Are you serious?
That's some amazing growth.
Oh my gosh, we need to pray for you, brother.
I just don't.
That's
I'm
amazing.
just not a hairy person.
Wow, that's awesome. Hasn't shaved in a year. I think the whole world needs to see this.
That's crazy.
We need to have a full-on YouTube show for this one.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, so good. So, and what our listeners don't know, Jeff, is that your beard has shrunk since the last time I saw you.
I don't know why you got to bring that up.
I'm pretty sure, it's affected me emotionally. So I just want to make sure, what's happening here. Because all of a sudden, I'm sitting on a video call with you one day, and I'm like, baby beard has returned. What has happened?
You honestly, you had to been one of the only people that have really noticed.
Are you serious?
I am 100% serious.
That beard was glorious.
I walked
a few weeks ago
downstairs and saw my mother-in-law. She's like, "Hey Jeff, just talking to me."
Say anything.
Had a full conversation. Didn't say a word.
Women are supposed to notice these.
I know.
Things. They notice each other's hair if there's a new streak in there.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
But not the beard.
That's just insulting.
Yeah.
That's insulting.
So
man, because your beard was glorious before. I remember seeing a stray cat stuck in there.
Big.
I mean, it was awesome.
It was big, couple birds.
Yeah. You never know what could happen.
No.
It was
never.
awesome. I mean, it was full on looking from 300. I mean, you pretty much had the bod and everything to go with it.
Yeah, pretty much. Close enough. Close enough.
Too fun. Well, for those that don't have beards, you just don't know what you're missing out on, and probably you'd relate more to Dante on the show, but that's all good. But
those that do, just so you know, if you watch YouTube to get beard cutting advice, they're not always they don't always work out too well.
Right, just pay the $30, go to the barber and let them do it. Right,
let them do it.
Come on,
yeah.
And you always go to a bearded barber because they understand the emotion behind making sure your beard is perfect. Yeah, it's so good. So, anyways, I'm excited. I've had a pretty decent week too, and it's been fun hanging out with the kids and doing all kinds of fun stuff. We were talking about funny stories earlier of my come home from work, and my wife's sitting there and she looks pretty perturbed, and I asked, "What's going on? Are you okay?" And she says, "Your son can't come out of his room until dinner." I said, "Okay, well, what's going on? What happened?" He pooped on the floor. So that was a new one. I was like, well, we don't have a dog, so I guess my 6-year-old could poop on the floor. That's fantastic. So, and she was more upset because she stepped in it because he didn't tell her. So the fun things that you have when you have kids, right, Jeff?
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But speaking of funny stories,
yes.
I did promise I would tell you guys a funny story.
Yes.
Are you ready for this, Dante?
Waited to do this on air.
I am ready.
I did.
Everyone is waiting for it.
Everyone's waiting for this. So, as you know, Dante may not know, but as you know, I went to go do a memorial.
This is going to be funny, Jeff? This seems morbid, bro.
Just wait for it.
Okay.
Just wait for it.
Goodness gracious.
Okay, so I'm ready for the memorial. I'm dressed, decently, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get the big idea that
was the memorial before or after your beard is gone?
It was after my beard is gone.
So that's what the memorial was.
That's
for.
what it was was the
I
beard.
knew it.
Had a little shoebox with the hair in there.
Oh,
yeah.
Lord. Sorry.
So I go Drop my wife off at Target before the memorial because she wants to get something for somebody or something. You know,
Another reason to have a memorial.
very-
Dropping your wife off at Target.
I know. There goes my money. So she's being thoughtful and gonna get something for someone. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be thoughtful, and I'm gonna go through Starbucks that's right there and get her some Starbucks.
Right.
So I get in line for Starbucks. It's always quite the line here. And so I'm waiting and waiting. I finally get up to the front. Lady hands me one drink, and I have 2 drinks. She hands me one drink, and she was like, "Oh, you heading off to work?" And I look at her. I'm like, "No, I'm actually going to a memorial." And she goes, and like she's like seriously like just like flabbergasted. She doesn't know how to respond to that. And so I'm just kind of looking at her for a moment, and she's like, "Well, can I ask who it was for?" And I'm like, "It's actually for my nephew." She's like, "A baby?" And I'm like, "No, not a baby, not a baby. He was older. He's like 26." And she's like, "That's still really sad." I'm like, "I know, it is very sad, but I appreciate it. Thank you." And she's like, "Oh my gosh." And she sits there and she pauses. Just like this, just dead pause, staring right at me. And you could see her kind of like thinking, wheels turning. She goes, "You know, I always told my family if I die, they should cremate me. And if they don't cremate me, I'm going to come back and haunt them. And how they'll know it's me, I'm going to flick them in the nipple while they're in the shower."
What the heck?
And I'm like, "Huh?"
Oh my God.
And I'm like looking at her, and I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to this. I don't know, like, what am I supposed to do with this kind of information? Like, why?
Probably call her family.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was just said. And she's like looking at me, and then the guy behind me actually honks because he thinks that like I got my drink and I'm just chit chatting. So he like honks, and so she like just looks at him like mad dogs him. She's like, "You still got another drink coming. Hold on." And so she like goes and grabs my drink, which I'm pretty sure was already ready. But she brings it back, gives me the drink, and she's like, "You could stay here for another 5 minutes. I don't care about that guy." And I'm like, I'm good. Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
And I take
That is
off.
some craziness right there. Wow.
Yep.
Yep. You blew me away with that story. Because at first you're thinking this lady's like totally like feels bad for you that you're in this terrible situation, and then she wants to talk about like nipple flicking in the shower.
Yep.
That's incredible.
She went from so sad baby dying to nipple flicking in a matter of like minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty much like every Sunday sermon at Livingstone's church.
Oh yeah.
So anything could happen.
Oh yeah.
You know, you'll be in tears thinking about how important life is, and then all of a sudden going, "Are you allowed to say that at church?"
Yeah.
You know?
You're allowed to talk about nipple flicking?
Right, nipple flicking. Holy moly! You know,
Yeah.
This isn't Here We Grow podcast. You know,
So-
can't be saying that stuff at church. But
So I
anyway.
literally like pulled away. Like I went and picked up my wife. I'm like, "You're not going to believe a word I'm going to tell you right now." But this just happened.
Wow.
This just happened to me.
That's amazing. What did she end up getting at Target? Do you remember?
You know what? Actually, funny enough, she went to go buy like a toy for my niece's daughter. I don't know what she would be.
Is that like a super niece?
Something like that.
I don't know.
Super niece. I like it.
Super
That's
niece.
a new thing. Super
Yeah.
niece. She went to go buy her a toy, but while she was in there happens to be a freaking Starbucks inside of there,
I
which
knew
she
this was
got
gonna
her own
happen.
drink.
Oh my gosh, I was going to predict that. I totally should have said it
Yep.
so nobody know that.
She got her own drink, and she thought of me. She thought of me, and she got me a croissant while
Oh,
she was in
okay.
there. And I was like, "Great, no, man, you wanted." I thought I was trying to be nice, and no,
Yeah, well played.
I just failed
Yeah, it's okay.
just failed.
Somebody probably needed that drink somewhere.
somewhere.
But that's awesome. You wouldn't have had that great story without that. So
Yeah.
I'm glad it happened.
It's now a household thing for us. Like,
Yes,
it's
nipple
just,
flickers.
yeah, it's gonna be nipple flicking
Start
for
calling
you. Mm.
that to your kids. You know, listen you up, you little nipple flicker.
Wow.
I mean, when they poop on the floor, what are you
Oh,
going to say
yeah,
to them? You know.
yeah.
So, anyways,
You don't just smack them on the nose with a newspaper.
Yeah, you know that might work. You know, rub their face in it.
Oh my
Do you get in
gosh.
trouble for that? I don't know if that works.
I think so. Just maybe. Just maybe.
Oh man, some dog lovers are going to write into the show.
man.
now. I apologize. I don't have a dog,
Oh.
just so everyone knows.
Dog lovers or CPS. Either one's
Yeah,
gonna write
either
in.
one. You know, somebody's getting their nose rubbed in it. So
Yeah. Oh
anyway.
my gosh.
Well, awesome. So, anyways, what we're going to be talking about today is having some bold faith and having some bold obedience, and why we're talking about that here on the Here We Go podcast. We like to have a good time and have some fun, and so we're glad that you're listening and hopefully you're laughing along with us. But on a serious note, Jeff, what are some times in your life where you've had to have some bold obedience with God, where God asks you to do something which seems like it doesn't make sense? It's not going to make sense to people around you, but you're obedient in it, and he comes through on the other side.
Well, honestly, I mean, most of the time that God speaks to me, it's normally like that. It's normally doesn't make any sense. I don't really want to do it. It's not something, some people ask, well, how do you know, God's speaking to me? I'm like, more often than not, it's not something I would come up with my own. Like I would not be sitting there like, God told me just to sit at home and eat some bacon and, sit in a jacuzzi for a while.
You to do that too?
I wish.
Dude, we should do that. We should do our podcast in the jacuzzi with bacon.
We've already pitched this to Dante.
Oh my gosh, Dante, talk to your manager.
He's the one trying to put the kibosh on.
Let's make this thing happen.
Once we do that, there's no going backwards.
Come on. I think you dip it in maple and then put it in chocolate, and then we eat that afterwards.
Is that the Canadian side of you?
Oh my gosh, that sounds glorious.
Just like your hockey Canadian love, you're just like,
That's
everything
it.
has to have maple syrup
Put
now?
maple syrup on it, I'm pretty much like Buddy the Elf, It's like another food group.
Can you chug maple syrup?
If you want to. If you want to die, probably. It's like molasses.
I don't really want to die.
That sounds kind of like painful.
Does it?
I don't know.
You should try it.
Maybe heat it up first.
Heat it up.
Would that hurt worse?
So it just burns rolling down.
Well,
Just
at least it rolls down. It'll be thinner. But anyways, why are we talking about that?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Craziness. Let's just go to the hot tub. Anyways. So God usually tells you to do something. It's not your own idea. So what kind of things has he asked you to do where you've seen him come through?
Let's see. I have a handful of stories. Obviously, I mean, there was a point in time too that I remember that whenever I talked, to God and I read His Word, obedience just came up over and over and over again, and I started trying. Okay, Lord, I'm gonna be obedient to the things that you tell me and what you put in me to do, and I spent like a solid week, just like anything the Lord tells me, I'm just going to say yes to, and it was hard. I was like, Lord, why is this so hard for me? Like, you're the author and maker of everything. Like, why is it so hard to listen to what you have to say and then do it? Like I know so much better than you.
Right.
Like, no, Lord, and so, I mean, I could tell you story after story where, he's sent me to do something. I'm like, Lord, I don't want to do this. Like, please, can there be somebody else?
Right.
But it really, the reoccurring thing is like the Lord, wants my obedience.
Yeah.
And that can be hard for people to hear. It really can be like somebody says, I want you to obey me, Dante. It's like, I ain't gonna obey you. I'm my own person.
Forget about it.
And to really open up our hearts and say, Lord, I want to be in obedience to you. Is a tough thing. We can say it all we want, but do we really want that to happen? Do we really want to, okay, Lord's telling me to go do this. I'm going to go do it.
Come on.
I'm going to go walk in that. And it looks scary. It looks murky, but I'm going to do it.
That's so good. I think they made a movie about you, right? And starring Jim Carrey. Yes Man? No?
The Yes Man?
Yeah.
I was wondering where you're going. I'm like, is he going to The Mask? Like,
no,
is that what you're talking about?
You never know. Like you said, just say yes to God.
What is he trying to say right now?
And I love that movie. It was a fun movie. But anyway, you're right, though. Like, in saying yes to God in every aspect of your life and letting him just take you on that journey. I know for me, it's been the same thing. It's one thing after another. And I try to tell, as a pastor, I'm always telling people, when you give your life to the Lord, it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder. It's going to get harder over and over again. And it's not in the way of it like being so detrimentally difficult. It's that every challenge you get is bigger. If you're going to go in faith with the Lord, he's going to go, oh, okay, well, you had big enough faith for this. All right, well, how about this one? Do you have big enough faith for that? Oh, how about this one? And I'm kind of sitting in this new place. I've had, with our men's group, we've been teaching about bold faith, bold words, bold prayer. And I remember when we went through the chapter on bold prayer, I sat down with one of the gentlemen from our men's group, and he had said, he's like, hey, Pastor, can I tell you something? I'm like, okay. And he says, I've been praying. I read the chapter on bold prayer, and I've been praying some big prayers. Can I tell you what they are? I'm like, sure. He said, I'm praying that God is going to make you debt-free, and you're going to have 2 working vehicles by the end of the year. I'm like, well, that's cool. But there was something inside of me that could not have that same boldness. I was like, thanks. And it's one of those things in boldness. Sometimes, when someone else is being bold and they're ahead of you in that mindset and those things that you're thinking of, it can be difficult sometimes to be able to see what they see, And so it's one of those things as you go on your journey and you watch other people and watch them in their faith and in their maturity. Sometimes we think like, oh man, that's an asinine thing to try to pray for. Like, why can't you pray for like world peace or something? Not debt free for me. I'm a pastor. I don't make any money, bro. Come on, let's think this thing through. But anyway, no, I'm just joking. But in that, you have to grow in it. You have to grow, and on the Here We Grow podcast, that's what we're all about, right? So you got to grow in your faith. You got to grow in your ability to be boldness. And where does boldness come from? Boldness is birthed out of belief. Right? And belief comes through seeing an expression of God, right? When God moves, you see it and you believe it and you've experienced it. So then the next time something comes, you can be bold in it. All of a sudden you're like, well, God came through before. He can come through again.
So really, I think that it to simplify it even more, that boldness comes from trust.
That's
right.
Good. Yeah.
So it's a matter of you can feel bold and believing in those prayers because you trust the one you're praying to, right? And it was actually really funny. I talked to you a little bit about this. I'd heard something that kind of like really convicted my heart.
Oh yeah.
And it had to do with really trusting God and believing Him and so one of the speakers that I was listening to kind of talked about it like this. He kind of asked his people, about trusting God and asked about, anyone here, have you ever in some capacity given out an assignment to someone for them to do?
Yeah, definitely.
Dante, have you ever given out an assignment for someone to do in any way, shape, or form? Like you said, here, I need you to do this.
Yes.
Okay. You as well?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I've obviously as a pastor, you give out lots of assignments,
a
trying to
few.
delegate different things. So out of the times that you guys have done it, how many times, like after you've given it, have you worried about it afterwards? Like, I worried that person's going to do it.
Well, I tell it to my kids, so all the time.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
I tell
Absolutely.
that to volunteers, so all the time also.
And so we tend to worry about it. Like we'll give it out, and then we're like, well, are they going to really do it? Are they going to do this? Maybe I should check on them. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do this. I kind of do this. And he was kind of just talking about it. He's like, well, let's follow up with that question. He's like, have you ever given an assignment out to someone and not worried about it, Dante?
And not worried about it?
Giving it to him and just, nope, I'm not going to worry about this. I know they can do it.
Oh, yeah, when I ask my wife to do something.
Okay.
Hello.
So,
come on, brownie points for Dante.
So tell me, Dante, what was the difference? Why didn't you have to worry about it?
Because she's come through pretty much every time I've asked her to do something. She's been able to do it.
Okay. So you trusted her with what the experience that you've had before, right?
Correct.
Sandra's a rock star.
Always.
Absolutely.
What about you, Justin?
I definitely have. I've had plenty of people come through, and because they've come through many times, I can trust them to do it again.
And so what convicted me was that, do I trust God like that?
Come on.
Do I trust God that when I pray to Him and I tell Him, Lord, these are things that are going on, and afterwards, I just worry about them. I just worry and I say, you know what? Maybe I should check up on God. Maybe I should, pray about this again and again because maybe He didn't hear me. Maybe He's not getting the message. And or you know what? Maybe I should just do this. Maybe I should do it because maybe I can do it better than God.
So good.
And a lot of times we won't boil it down to that, but really, that's what it gets down to. Like, you know what? I'm just going to go do this. I told God it's His. I told God He can take care of it. But I'm just going to take care of it. And it's a question, and it's convicting to us. Do we really trust God?
Wow, come on.
Do we really trust that He's going to take care of it? And He's going to take care of it because He's taken care of it time after time after time again. Right, Dante?
Absolutely.
Correct.
So good.
And so boldness comes from having a trust. Like I can be bold with you because I have a trust that our friendship is bigger than anything I can say to you.
Right.
You know, or I have a boldness in knowing that I have a God who's right behind me, who is bigger than anything else out there.
That's right. Come on.
And I can speak anything to anything because
good.
he's with there with me.
So good. Well, and tomorrow, as our listeners will listen to the sermon from Livingstone's Church, it'll be on 11th hour faith. And it's the way it's going to go is talking about how do we have faith and have belief and trust in hours 1 through 10 when we know that God's always going to come through in the 11th hour. And it's exactly that, right? If personally, you know, I've spent a lot of time worrying. How's this going to work out? How's it going to happen? And what are we going to have to do to get there? And a lot of times God will show me beforehand what's going to happen, where it's all going to go. But can we just trust him in that? You know, and I think for a lot of us, sometimes you're right in the middle of it. You're in hour 3 and going, is God going to come through yet? Like, is he really going to come through on this? Do I need to prepare for God to come through? What do I need to do to make sure I'm in the right place for when God comes through? And it's like all this thought process instead of just trusting in a minute and walking with him and then experiencing that 11th hour just the way that he said it was going to happen. You know, so it's such a good thing. So I'm excited for that message. Hopefully you enjoy that tomorrow as you listen in, and it'll be really fun. So Jeff, what are some things where, you know, you worried about it? Like, I mean, if we're being real with people, like there's been plenty of times where we're like, hey, God, you said this was going to come through. How come it hasn't happened yet?
Oh yeah. I mean, more often than I like to admit, right?
Right. Come on.
And so, I mean, we pray about, you know, I try to pray about most things that happen in my life, you know, and but more often than not, like especially with like work things, like running, you know, the business, you know, I'd be like, Lord, this is just stressing me out, this and that. I'm like, can you just, you know, take care of this for me, you know? And then I'll be like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to do that, and I just immediately take it right back from God,
right.
You know, like, here, God, you could have it. Wait a minute, no, you know, I guess I'll do it, God, you know.
Right. No, you're absolutely right.
And I mean, it happens often because we as people, we tend to forget. We forget how big God is.
It's so true. It's so true. I was just telling our men's group about how when I was praying with the Lord about launching this church, and at the time, like I was really scared about it. It took about 7 months of prayer and thinking of if this thing's really going to happen or not. And by the time it came down to it, and I was asked by my superiors, like, what did God say? And I said very boldly, like, okay, you know, I'm ready to do this no matter what happens. Like if I have to get a second job, I have to work at McDonald's or whatever I have to do to pastor this church, I believe we're supposed to launch and we're supposed to do this. And with that boldness sitting there, and they're looking at me like, okay. Right? And then now it's been a month since we've launched the church, and I'm sitting in times going like, oh, this is unfair. This is too hard. And I had God remind me. He said, well, you said you were willing to do it with nothing. You said you were willing to do it with everyone against you. You said you were willing to do it with all these things, and I haven't made it that hard for you. So why are you freaking out? And it was just like, oh, Lord, thank you for that reminder, because you're not trusting God in it. The situation's way better than what I was willing to go through, but yet was I really willing to go through it if God asked me to do that, you know? And so I think all of us kind of have to think about those things in our lives, you know, when we're saying, yes, Lord, send me, you know, like when you know, Peter's saying to Jesus, he's like, oh, I'll go with you to the end. I'll die with you. And Jesus is like, will you really? Because when the crow crows for the third time, you'll have denied me 3 times. Will you really?
Do crows crow?
I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. Roosters crow. Yes, thank you. I apologize. It's a little late this evening, so I'm losing it. But yeah, no, thank you. But yeah, so I mean, we all go with the best intentions, but when it gets real, are we going to still live out those vows and live for Jesus and have trust in Him?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good.
And oftentimes we don't.
Yeah, it's true. And crows don't crow. Yeah.
Crows don't crow.
Yeah, crows don't crow. We need some stickers.
They may
that say
cry,
that.
but they don't crow.
Here we grow, you know.
Oh my gosh.
That just happened. But
oh
anyway.
my gosh.
So good. But bold obedience, you know. What are, you know, let's think. If there's some different people out there that are working to some bold obedience, you talked about owning a small business, right? It takes some bold obedience to run a business and to put yourself out there. What would you say to some of our small business owners that are like on the rocks, kind of going like, can I believe for this to work? Or what would you say to somebody who's maybe wants to be an entrepreneur, wants to take that leap from W-2 into that 1099, into that business ownership? What would you say to one of those guys getting ready to take the leap?
I would say talk to Justin. He's the man about taking leaps.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of advice you can give, obviously, people.
Yeah.
I mean, you got some of the best advice that I know, especially on that stuff, because you got all the cool stories.
Oh, that's fun. I definitely didn't mean for that to go that direction. I was waiting for some pearls of wisdom.
It went that direction. Nah.
Yeah.
No. So
They must have got lost in your beard before it got shaved.
Oh man,
Yeah,
another thing I lost in there. Yeah. So, for people that are wanting to take that leap of faith, it really is. And if you're in it, be in it.
There you go.
Right.
All
If
in.
you gotta be all in. Most businesses close their doors after, what is it, the first year, something like that, I think.
Oh yeah.
And so, if you're thinking about taking that step, if you're, thinking about, a lot of people have the same question about going into ministry. Like,
That's
should
good,
I just go into it? And if the Lord's calling you, why aren't you? You know?
You should be in it already.
Yeah. And if you're called to be an entrepreneur, if you're called to have your own business,
Yeah.
Do it. Get out there and make it happen. It is not going to be easy. It's going to be a struggle. But if it's what you're supposed to do,
Right.
you should be doing it.
Now here's a question. So a lot of people are always like get kind of stammered in the getting ready to get ready type mentality, right? So if you're starting a new business, should it all work a certain perfect way, or is there a right way to start a business, or what do you do?
Obviously that's a great question. And a lot of people will get stuck in that zone. Like, well, I'm prepping to get here. I'm prepping to get here. And there's never a perfect time.
That's right.
And just like having children, there's never a perfect time,
Right.
start having
You're
children.
never gonna be ready.
You're never going to be financially ready enough. You just take the step and you go for it.
You do it.
And one thing that I've learned over, my years in, Christianity and the church and, around other people that own businesses is that you take the step, and you may fail and things may go wrong, but it's just learning.
That's right.
And if you're not making progress, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're stagnant. And if you're stagnant, you stink.
That's right. And you're listening to the right podcast right there. That's what's happening. The Here We Grow podcast. And so you're absolutely right. There is no perfect time to get started other than now. Right. I remember my favorite author is John Maxwell, and he says there's two perfect times to plant a tree. If you want shade, the perfect time to plant a tree was 25 years ago, so that you could have shade now. But the next best time is right now, right? There's no other time to get started. If you want shade the fastest way possible, plant your tree, right? And so it's the same thing in planning your vision, planning your, if you're going to do what God's called you to do, if you're going to step out into ministry, full-time ministry, it can be nerve-wracking. There's a lot of things in business or in ministry or any of those things, and it's take the leap. Jump out there and do this thing, right? And it's that bold obedience, especially if God told you to do it. Now, I'll be honest with you. If you had an idea and you didn't seek the Lord on that, it might not be the best idea. It's one of those things where if you're seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then he will give you everything that you need. Now, if you are jumping out into what you feel God's called you to do, that's a whole different thing. Now it doesn't really matter if it makes sense or not, because God is going to come through and he's going to make sure that you have the provision that you need, right? He doesn't call the qualified, right? He qualifies the called.
Amen.
And so it's more important that you are obedient to the word of God, not that you're the smartest, not that you have the best track record. It really just comes down to, will you be obedient to me, right?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because it really, if you look historically, biblically, Jesus picked the people that were not the greatest, not the
That's
best,
right.
to fulfill, his kingdom.
That's right.
And so constantly you see this reminder of he qualifies the called.
That's right.
And, he took fishermen, he took, a tax collector, he just chose a big variety of different people that weren't the best of the best. I mean, if you look at it, one of the studies that I did a little bit was really on John and Peter and, and just where their background came from.
Yeah.
And that most of the time, they say, you know, especially when they go into trades like fishing,
Yeah.
that they weren't the best of the best to go into the synagogue and learn.
right.
And they didn't memorize the Torah well enough.
That's
and they
right.
didn't,
Yep.
you know, hit all the markers that would say that person's a smart guy. That person knows the word. That person knows the Lord,
Right.
you know, because they're there.
Mhm.
And Jesus basically just asked them, follow me.
Yep.
He just gave him one thing and see, are you going to be obedient?
Mhm.
You know, Justin, will you follow Jesus?
Right.
Because that's all he asked
That's
for.
all he asked.
Dante, will you follow Jesus? Because
Come
that's
on,
all he
Dante.
asked for.
Sorry, I was getting my mic on. Yes.
Dante's ready to follow Jesus.
That's what I like to hear.
Good.
And that was his only question to them. You know, like, will you follow me?
Mm-hmm.
And they got up and followed him. And he was like,
right.
okay, there's obedience right there.
Yep.
And that's what he's looking for. He's looking
Right.
to have a connection with us,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be with us, experience things with them through him.
Mm.
And all he's asking is, follow me.
Just follow me. That's it. And you know, it really is that simple. I've had so many people ask, like, oh, how do I become a pastor? What steps do I have to take? And what should I do? And I'm like the worst person to ask that because I didn't take any of the right steps. I didn't do any of the things that would be said to do, like through formal education and those kinds of things. All I did is exactly what you said yes to Jesus over and over and over again. When God asked me to come into the church and clean the church and be the cleaning lady for the church, I said yes.
Did you wear a dress?
I didn't, but
Then
I
you
did
weren't-
carry around
then-
my little infant baby, my brand new little baby boy.
Then you weren't
I
quite.
swaddled that little dude. I put him on the pew, and then I started vacuuming up the church before anybody got there.
You're not
Nobody
supposed to
knew.
let a baby sit in its own pew.
It's true.
I got that from you.
That's true. You did get that from me. Well played, sir. That was well lobbed up and well dunked. So good job. But yeah, so I mean, you just got to do whatever God puts in front of you. And when He puts that little thing, you know, it says, yeah, he who's faithful in little can be made ruler over much. And so it's that same mentality of going, okay, if I can be faithful with stacking chairs, if I can be faithful with praying for someone when God asks me to, when I can be faithful with showing up every week. I mean, that's hard enough in our day and age for people to actually come to church every week. I mean, goodness gracious, you know, so it's just being there and being a part of what God wants to do. And then all of a sudden it's like, here I am, you know, 10, 15 years later, and God's made us the lead pastors of Livingstone's church, you know? And so it's like, you just say yes.
Yeah.
Just say
It's
yes.
funny that you say that because I literally was having a conversation with the Lord, and I was just like, I was convicted about, you know, it was something dumb I was doing. I don't know. It was like, and it was just like, I was like squandering my time basically. I was playing on my phone and not getting things done that I should be getting done. And I was, you know, I just had a conversation with the Lord, and I was like, you know, Lord, like I felt so bad after doing it. And I was like, oh man, I wasted so much time. And I'm like, Lord, I get it. I see why you wouldn't trust me with some of these things because I'm just jacking up the small things, you know? And some people would be like, oh, you're being hard on yourself. But I'm but it was like an honest moment, you know, for me and my time and for the Lord, and just mean like, you know, gosh, man, like, I think about these things sometimes like, Lord, why don't you have me doing this? Why don't you have me doing that? Like, why don't I just take care of the things that I have right in front of me that I'm supposed to do and be faithful to these things that I'm at and focus on those instead of trying to do all these other things, you know, like let's handle those first. And I'm like, you know, that's why the Lord said that. That's why He said, you know, faithful with the small things, you know,
That's so
faithful
good.
with the bigger things.
That's so good.
And so it was just kind of conviction. I just kind of felt like, oh, Lord, I feel like I'm missing the mark here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. You know, I had a mentor tell me one time when I owned my own business when I was a young guy, and I hated my job. I hated it. I hated sitting in a cubicle. I hated selling stuff. I hated doing all that stuff. And I remember talking with my buddy, my mentor at the time, and asking him, like, you know, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get out of my job. I just want to build my business big enough to where I can get out of my job and be done with all this stuff. And he said, Justin, you can't approach it with that mentality. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, you think I should like my job? Like, what is that supposed to mean? He said, no. He said, if a motor is not running on all cylinders, if you have a cylinder that's misfiring, then you're not going to function well. So if you're not functioning like a 6-cylinder, an 8-cylinder car in every area of your life, you're not going to be functioning well altogether. So it's like that thought process. If you're going to bring excellence to your business, but then be a turd at work, it's not going to work very well for you. You can't just switch gears like that. You're either going to act like a turd all the time, or you're going to act excellent all the time. So it's like taking that mentality. Like if you want to be great at anything, you got to be able to humble yourself and serve others, right? So the more that you're a servant and have that servant mentality, that servant heart, then God will bless you with more and more things to do. So fire on all 6 cylinders, fire on all 8 cylinders, and do what God has created you to do. If you're going to be this type of person, just be it everywhere you are. You'll get promoted at work while you're building your business. Your business will grow faster because you're not irritated and broken because of work, right? Instead, you're going to be able to be a functioning person the way that God created you to be. So yeah, that's some good stuff. And every time we get on this podcast, we always want to challenge some people and put a little challenge out there. So for this week, if we're going to challenge you in having some bold faith and some bold obedience, I would just ask God, what do you want me to be bold in? What is it? What is the next step? And just sit in a moment of prayer. If you got to get up early in the morning so it's quiet in your house, that might be a good idea, just so that you can hear the Lord and say, God, what is this next bold step that you want me to take? Maybe it's calling that person that I've been so angry at or bitter with. Maybe it's, asking your boss for a raise. Maybe it's starting that business. Maybe it's praying for someone out loud. I know that a lot of people have that's a challenging thing for them. Whatever that next step of bold obedience is, take it. Take it and see what God will do. So thank you so much for joining us on the Here We Grow podcast. Love having you, Jeff. It was so awesome. And we if you could, listen to our podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And of course, don't be afraid to rate our podcast with 5 stars. Give us some of your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you for joining us on the Here We Grow podcast.
Yay.